I recently reviewed the Lenovo Slim 9i, but it costs $1,900 and it's very expensive. But I just got in the Lenovo Slim 7i, which is almost $700 cheaper. And I thought this would be a good idea to compare them both to see if the 9i is actually worth almost $700 more. Now, both of these devices are spec'd very similarly, except for a couple of differences, like the display, for example. But I feel like by the end of this video, we can really answer the question on whether or not you should spend more money on a fancier looking laptop. Now, they're both beautiful products, right? But definitely some design choices over here. With the 9i, it's made out of glass, it's smaller, it's a little bit lighter at like 2.76 pounds compared to 2.82 pounds. But at the end of the day, both of these laptops are ridiculously light, and they both rock a 14-inch display. Now, if you buy the 7i, you're getting more of a traditional laptop. Like, this is a metal lid, right? It has pretty good flexibility in the middle. It gives in a little bit, but nothing to worry about. Whereas the 9i is completely glass. Now, it looks fantastic, and you get these wonderful reflections off of it, depending on how the light hits it. But at the end of the day, it's glass. And what happens with glass is you just get a lot of fingerprints. And if you ever drop this thing, there's a very good chance it will completely shatter, whereas the 7i just might get a little dent. Now, for almost $700 less, you get more ports. You know, if you pick up the 7i, you look on the left-hand side, you got an HDMI port, you got two Thunderbolt 4 ports, you got a micro SD card slot, and then on the right side, you have another USB-A port, a combo audio jack, your power button, and then of course a camera switch to disable it. Whereas on the 9i, they reduced the form factor so much that they could only include two Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is kind of disappointing. Now, the camera switch on the side and the power button is convenient if you dock your laptop quite often. You don't have to open it up to click anything. You can leave the display closed, easily accessing that power button to turn it on and off. The downfall to this is every time you move it, you sometimes hit the power button and the device goes to sleep. Now, other differences obviously appear when you open up these laptops. They both have the reverse notch, but you do get a bigger keyboard with the 7i. But the cool thing is the keys are identical. The travel distance is identical. They both have that 0.3 millimeter dish cap where your fingers just rest right in the middle. They're the U-shaped keys, the stuff that you love from a Lenovo keyboard. The advantage does go to the 9i if you want a fingerprint sensor. The 7i does not have one, but you do get Windows Hello facial recognition to log you in. The other advantage to the 7i, the more affordable laptop, is you just get a bigger touchpad. Like, this touchpad is made out of glass, just like the one on the 9i, but it just gives you more real estate. I feel like the 9i for $1,900 should have a haptic touchpad. Like, there's no excuse, right? Especially when you're paying this kind of money. But at the end of the day, you just get a bigger one with a more affordable option. The good news is both of these devices do come with 4 speakers, and they both obviously have backlighting for the keys. But you do get a bit more flexibility with the 7i. The display itself can almost go completely flat, whereas the 9i kind of stays like this. So if you're the individual that likes to go into the office and slide your laptop under your monitor so that you can focus on using the keyboard, you obviously have a lot more accessibility using the 7i compared to the 9. But the one area where the 9i kind of does improve the quality of the experience is this display. It just looks so good, you know? They're both OLED, but you get a more pixel dense display on the 9i. We're talking about a 4K display compared to a 1920 by 1200 display. It's 120 hertz compared to only 60 hertz. And look, I don't want to downplay the 7i, like the display itself is still very beautiful. It just doesn't get as bright. This has a higher peak brightness compared to the 7i, but the 7i still has a very good display if you don't mind 60 hertz. The downfall to this bezel-less beauty is that the camera is not that great. Because they had to use an under-display camera, which by the way, you barely see unless you look super close, you don't get the best webcam quality. So if you're gonna be someone who's buying this laptop, doing a lot of Zoom calls and meetings, I would stick with the 7i. The quality of the webcam just looks a lot better. Also, if you're a big fan of the Aura partnership with Intel, the 7i has that, whereas the 9i does not. So you can do cool things like tap the side of your display to move pictures back and forth between your phone. But look, I don't think that's a big deal for most people. At the end of the day, they both pretty much provide a very similar software experience. Now, newsflash, performance on these guys are almost identical. They share the same CPU, they have the exact same amount of RAM, and they have the exact same integrated GPU. Single core clock speeds are within margins of each other. Same holds true with multi-core speeds, with the Slim 9i being a tiny bit faster. If you're buying this to compile code, there are better laptops out there. The Lunar Lake chips are not the fastest, but they do provide great efficiency. Photoshop users will love both of these laptops. Photoshop does run great on both devices. I wouldn't buy these for video editing. These are not video editing machines, but if you have to jump into one to make a couple of changes or just edit something easy and quickly, they can do it. But again, it's not going to be the fastest experience, and the performance is almost identical. If you're wondering why the Slim 9i is always a little bit faster, is because they push the CPU a little bit harder, which means you get a bit more heat overall. It's not concerning, it's not overheating or anything, they just allow the CPU to run a little bit hotter. The downfall to this, though, is that you do get more fan noise. The fan noise on the 9i is significantly louder than the Slim 7i. The 7i is almost quiet most of the time, which makes it like a fanless experience, even though it has fans inside of it. GPU performance is also almost identical, with again the 9i being a tiny bit faster because it allows the CPU and GPU to run a tiny bit hotter. The good news is the 140V is quite capable, so if you want to play a couple of games on this, if you don't mind dropping the settings down to low and assuming they're not super graphically demanding, you can easily do it on both of these devices. The advantage to the 120 Hz displays, it might be a little bit smoother, but trying to get 120 FPS on an integrated GPU in most games is not that easy to do. Internally, both of these laptops are kind of the same, but also a little different. For one, the fan layout on the 7i has them stacked together, which is not the best solution for cooling, but it's fine for a Lunar Lake chip. The 9i has them completely separate on opposite ends, which kind of goes towards my thinking of that's the reason why they're comfortable of allowing the CPU to run a tiny bit hotter for extra performance, because the cooling is a tiny bit better on the 9i. But you do have a swappable Wi-Fi card with the 7i where you don't on the 9i. Both laptops share a 2240 drive slot. I personally prefer the longer ones for better read and write speeds, but these two drives are actually not that bad in terms of performance. Now the battery sizes are different. On the 7i, which has the bigger chassis, you actually get a smaller battery, 70 watt hours compared to 75, but battery life on the 7i is drastically better. I got over 26 hours of use on my PC Mark Modern test compared to what I got on the 9i. It was drastically better. And that's probably due to the fact that this laptop is a bit more conservative. It doesn't sip as much power as often as this little one. So look, the big question, do you buy the 9i or do you stick with the 7i? Obviously you don't buy the 9i. Like, look, it's a beautiful laptop. I think it's gorgeous, and I'm glad Lenovo's trying different things, but I don't think there's almost $700 more of features in this thing. Yes, you get the better display, but you get an inferior webcam. Yes, you get a smaller form factor, but you lose out on the ports. And even though the battery's bigger in here, you still get better battery life with the 7i. They both still have beautiful displays. They're both OLED, and even though this is a tiny bit lighter, you really can't feel the difference because it's so minor. I think the only reason to buy the 9i is if you're really into aesthetics, or you work for a company, a corporation, and your boss's contract is with Lenovo and he asks you, what laptop do you want, right? But for most people, save yourself the money and just buy the Slim 7i. You'll thank me later. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.